77 podcast. Today, we're unpacking the rich tapestry of femininity, an attribute that extends far beyond what meets the eye. In a world obsessed with appearances and labels, we aim to dive beneath the surface, exploring the inherent values that define womanhood. From the resilience of character to the intricacies of entrepreneurship, join us as we celebrate and understand what it truly means to be a woman, both in her solitude and in community. Let's get started. Welcome to the Route 77 podcast. I am Natasha, your host, and I'm here with Monique.
Hello.
And David.
Hello.
And we want to talk about all things girly today. No, just kidding. So David's awkward already.
And so are you,
yes.
Miss Tomboy. I'm probably the only girly girl here.
So we want to take time, this podcast and next podcast, to talk about femininity and what that looks like from a Christian perspective. If someone asked you, Monique, how do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10 for femininity?
How do I feel?
Yes. How
Feminine?
Yeah, on a femininity scale, where would you be? 0 being like not feminine at all, and 10 being like the most feminine you could ever possibly be.
5.
5. What about you, David? How does your femininity scale work?
It's 5.
Mine is 5.
And it's 5.
Feminine side of you, yes. And I would say, and based on saying how feminine do I feel, probably like a 2 or a 3. That's maybe pushing it. But I think that more comes from a societal view of femininity. I can't even say the word.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of issues pop up, especially when it comes to gender fluidity, is that people feel like they're more feminine or more masculine instead of the fact that they are feminine and they are masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And society and culture has actually narrowed those definitions so much. And I'd like to push and be like, if you are a woman or a girl or a female or whatever you want to say, XX, right? X?
Yeah. XY is male.
Yeah. So if
XX
you're
is female.
XX chromosomes, then you are feminine. And it doesn't have to be like pink, frilly things, a tiny little dog under your arm, and fashion statements. I don't know. Am I going Paris Hilton on that?
I'd like to just say, as a person who knows that she's a woman, has no issues either or, has no today I feel like, and today. As a woman, I don't wake up in the morning going, today I feel feminine. And the next day, today I don't feel I just am. Your feelings will lie to you all the time. And if I want to feel more feminine, I'm dressed up and I'll do the makeup and wear the girly dresses and whatnot. But most of the time I just wear normal clothes. I don't go any extra mile to,
Do we define those terms, feminist and feminine?
Or what feminine means?
Yeah,
In
I think we
society?
should clarify, or you guys should clarify what you mean by those two terms, because I think the definition is going to differ depending on the generation, slightly.
You mean for,
So I think it's very important that we define exactly what we mean by, oh, I got feminine traits, or or that I'm a feminist, because it differs.
Yeah, and I
What
think
people,
we're probably not going to deal with the feminism
no,
at this, because that's like a different topic.
No.
I think it's the fact that the femininity, you know how like they talk about toxic masculinity.
Ugh.
And then there's to be feminine, and it's not less to do with an ideology of feminism. But like femininity would be, as according to this, Oxford Dictionary says, qualities or attributes regarded as characteristic of women or girls. When we talk about that, again, society and culture brings up what it means to be a woman.
and I think that definition is far too narrow,
Yeah.
because I've met men who were men. They were not gay. They were not trans, but they were more feminine.
Feminine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they liked girls, and
Yeah.
even though one who was,
But that's what I like with saying we've in the culture and society, and even somewhat within the church, we've made this slice of pie on a pie chart of what it means to be a woman or feminine to be so narrow Like you have to fit these specific definitions, or then therefore you're not, or then you are not feminine. But as like a woman, you naturally are feminine. That's the nature of it. You are feminine. You can, we like to say where they present masculine is some of the things that they say now. And what essentially it is that you're more tomboyish. You wear your hair like a man. You wear your clothes like a man.
And
They call it presenting masculine. And instead, just say that's a woman and they're feminine because therefore, like they are a woman, that equals feminine. But the spectrum of feminine is a lot broader than like that. If you want a spectrum when it comes to gender, that is more what it is. There's a spectrum of what a woman is and femininity is, and there's a spectrum of what a man is and what masculinity is. And instead of narrowly defining it as, like I said, like pink bows, a little poodle in a designer Gucci bag or something, walking down the street in heels, 7-inch heels or something, like that's how you, if you actually try to create a stereotype of femininity, I think that's what your brain goes through, the mind goes through. But we do ourselves a disservice because we label this, or we put people in such narrow confines of what it means to be that, and especially in the church then, because then you're like, you really got to fit into this, or you're like an outlier, and to be an outlier in the church is like such a negative thing nowadays because we're always fighting this ideology of culture around us when it comes to gender fluidity. So, but for me, I am feminine because I'm a woman, but how I present that outwardly differs from how you present yourself outwardly. And David doesn't present this at all because he's a man.
Yeah.
And it just seems to be, the definitions have become so narrow. And if I were to present as I did growing up today, then there would have been, and I was in like a secular school where my parents weren't Christians without influence, there may have been a big push for me to start becoming or trying to become a transgender male. And because I was a tomboy, sports, short hair, animals, I don't know, farm kid, and yet
hates dresses,
cannot
hates
stand
makeup.
I'll do the makeup if I need to, like when I got the spots going on, hormonal spots, and like once a year when I go to a Christmas party, that's formal, but that's pretty much the limit. And it's not anything outlandish. The closest things that people could label as feminine, so to speak, towards my presentation in the culture would be the fact that I like flowery things like flowery tattoos, and glittery things. So glittery nail polish or something. That's the closest
Flowers,
quote unquote feminine things. If you went by a stereotype.
And your grandmother's china.
And my grandmother's china. I like my grandmother's china. It's cute. Gotta keep that going.
But anything else is, whereas like for me, I love that dress. I wish I could wear that dress. We do not have the body for that dress. We once upon a time had the body for that dress. That body is long gone. But and even sometimes wanting to wear the makeup, but I find now because I haven't worn makeup for so long because of Taekwondo, that things like mascara irritate my eyes now. So I find that I'm just better off I just don't really bother with makeup that much anymore.
I found that makeup would make me break out even if I washed thoroughly afterward. So I did not wear it growing up.
Yeah.
Although I went through a phase where I think not every, but many girls go through, they had those little teeny weeny, was it like Mary Kay or whatever they were?
Avon makeup samples.
Yes, they're teeny tiny little lipsticks. And I think I had some eyeshadow that my mom gave. My mom never wore makeup for all that much. She did sometimes, but she never kept me from trying it out. I went through a little phase of playing around with that, and then I went out of it, and that was it. Yeah, and
mine lasted for years.
Yeah, mine's. Yeah. And I definitely, when I left my ex, and he was all about feminine attire, I got rid of so many things in my closet that were not me, and including many dresses. I kept a couple in case I happen to need them, but I do have dress pants, which are nice, and more dressy shirts that I prefer if I can get away with that.
But those are all outward.
Yeah, and that
examples.
Seems to be how society functions. It's like how you, what they call present. Your outward is actually representing your inward desires instead of it just being, this is how I prefer
It's just an expression of your own
Well, there's
personality.
so much about that. You be you, do what's good for you, what you're comfortable with. And yet when you do that, it's like you start getting labeled.
So then the other side of that coin is how God sees you.
And God created us male and female, man and woman. And I'm not denying that there are people who suffer from gender dysphoria. And that's a different topic. This is for people who don't, the larger population. And we should stop trying to just put people in boxes, allow this fluidity within the gender in the sense that people present femininity and masculinity differently. Stop trying to label what that is.
You like sports and play with cars, so you really must be a boy. Oh, you like pink and flowery things and, decorating. You must be a girl.
Or gay or lesbian.
Right.
Like they try to label, they try to make it
Stop labeling people.
Yeah, they try to make it fit these small definitions within their own minds. And I thought too, one would be interesting to actually look into the scriptures and look at Proverbs 31 specifically, because it's dealing with a woman and is generally used as an example of what a good wife would look like. And instead, I'd like to talk about it of femininity and being what good godly woman can look like, irregardless of your relationship status. You can be single, you could be married, you could have children, you could not have children. There's so many things, but it actually presents like a really good blueprint for what a godly woman can look like, and not just a godly wife.
So is this where we're going to start picking it apart?
Yes. Let me see.
So it starts pretty much at Proverbs 31:10.
Yeah.
Which is a wife of noble character who can find. How will we change wife to woman? So a woman of noble character who can find, she's worth far more than rubies.
Yeah.
So this one would be about character and virtue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so a woman is not, her character and her virtue is not determined by marital status. Whether a woman is married or not married does not speak to her character or her virtue. Although there's this tendency to be like, if you're not married, then what are you doing? Or there's this assumption that there must be something going on somewhere. So
what is a noble character?
Good question.
David, what is your thoughts on that? A noble character.
I would have to say the most noblest character that I can possibly think of would be Jesus.
We all know that. But what does it mean?
But out of the top of my head, I can't think of anything. I would have to look at the life of Jesus and see how he applied all his.
We can look at Galatians, when he talks about fruit of the Spirit. So there's love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I like to how he makes a progress of it, where he says, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. So you're always building your faith, essentially. That a person of noble character, whether woman or man, is one who is dedicated to building their faith in Christ. And they're taking it and they have their faith, but then they also add their goodness to their faith. And that's not good works, but that's an outpouring of the love that Christ has shown them that they show to others.
So building themselves up and also building up other people.
Yeah. And doing good to those around them.
Admirable qualities that people would admire.
And also, I think too, add to goodness knowledge. Like, how many people I like to give this example. Think about your most favorite thing or something that you've really enjoyed and like how much you know about it. Like I've said this before, like when we've been watching Stargate and Monique first time watching it, like the amount of information I have that's outside of this show, like the specific show, like commentaries and fun facts and things is ridiculous because I really enjoyed it. So I found out all I could about it. And again, like when I was doing Taekwondo and I was trying to do get to my black belt and do all this stuff to get to it. That's one reason I started taking the apologetics course, was because here I am putting so much effort and work into learning about this martial art, which ultimately will not transcend here, the earth. But why am I not putting that same amount of effort into my faith? So you're not just living this sort of like initial faith that you accepted Christ and you're just moseying along. You're actually dedicated to trying to gain knowledge of your faith and of God and of Christ. And then also then showing love to those around you. And the fact that they're, I think too, when you're noble, you be considered, you're honest and you're looking out for the welfare of others, not just for yourself.
So what kind of knowledge would pertain to what you're discussing here? What kind of knowledge should people then seek in regards to what we are discussing
I think,
within the biblical context?
yeah, I think one, just getting to know your Bible is like a good first step. So reading it, trying to find out, talk to people, find books or anything that help you understand things you don't understand. And yeah, developing your faith from that perspective, like knowing God more will help you to know like how you should act to those around you. And like you said, Christ was the most noble character, and to understand fully how and why he did what he did can basically help you in your own faith to know what to do, what you do. Does that answer your question, David?
It's more like that was more of a broader statement, a more generalized statement in which this is what we can look at. We already know that we can look at the Bible, but I was more hoping for like maybe specific verses or a source in where, oh, we can look at this portion of Jesus' life and relate it to this, and how can we take that knowledge and then apply it to what you've been discussing within the context of single women. How would that influence the views and maybe definitions of feminist and feminism?
Oh, of like femininity, how to be.
Yeah, what does that look like in the through the eyes of Jesus? Now, this is a complicated question because you have to separate the culture in where Jesus grew up and where the apostles lived and or where they visited, and take what Jesus did and his characteristics of being a noble person and somehow apply that to women. Now, it's going to be a bit difficult, and I'm not sure how you guys would approach this. That's why I asked this question, like, what kind of knowledge do we need to look at that would relate between Jesus being a man and moving towards a woman? And normally I expected you to refer to maybe some of the Jesus's women followers who were women.
Yeah. I was just thinking when you're saying that, like with Mary and Martha, and how Mary, I think it was Mary who was the one that sat with Jesus.
And Martha was
in the kitchen. And Mary put the desire to learn from Jesus above the common expectation of the day.
And Jesus said what she chose was the better.
Yeah. And it's not specifically meaning don't go in the kitchen, but I think what they're saying is like the common expectation of society is one thing. But when you put that to the side for a better thing, like learning about Christ and learning from him or from the apostles, I think a lot of stuff that Paul says is like when you look at even when Paul talks to in his letters and he starts referring to ladies in the congregation. This lady did this and this lady did that and gave her home. And when he talks about, I think, Timothy's mother and grandmother and how like the way that they raised him in faith and their faith was strong. So I think when it comes to as a single woman trying to build their noble character, it has a lot to do with sitting at the feet of Christ and the feet of the Bible. And yeah, like we can talk about the specific women, but every person's different too. And how they're going to like what will speak to them within scripture and what God has called on their lives may look different from one to the other, but definitely just submersing yourself in the Bible as a whole.
Yeah, okay. So what are some of if you can think of passages out of the top of your head that might represent that in a sense? Because I'm curious.
He's enjoying this. Next week we'll have to do it to him.
We just read in 1 Timothy last night.
A couple nights ago because we started 2 Timothy last week.
It's interesting because a lot of people say that the Bible is very patriarchal. But if you look at the amount of times women are mentioned, where there are actual books that are all about women, like Esther and Ruth, the number of times that Paul mentions women and giving, and even Christ himself, most of his ministry was to women. The woman caught in adultery, the woman at the well, the lady who came and poured out her love on his feet and poured perfume over his head, where he talks about with Mary and Martha. There are so many instances where women are mentioned. To pull them apart, we'd be here all night talking about, and then there was this woman, and then there was that woman, and don't forget that woman.
But I think too, like you said, that there's this idea that Christianity is patriarchal and there's no place for a woman.
Lies.
And yet,
Sorry.
right? It is lies because it's actually the most gracious place to be a woman. It should be the most gracious place to be a woman. And like the amount of love that Christ expressed.
Even on
for
the
the
cross, when he was dying, he gave his mother to John to take care of. He never disregarded her, and he never forsook her.
Yeah. So I think too, as a woman, you could go through and just learn about, especially, I think there's more of a knowledge of the women in the Old Testament than there is of the women in the New Testament, aside from Mary and maybe Elizabeth. But then you might go, Mary and Martha. And then it's just, the one story they would probably think about would be that one.
Yeah.
And not even about Lazarus coming back from the dead and all that. But actually, if you go through and you start to see that these women weren't all married, and because they even talk about Dorcas and the fact that she was doing so much for the church. Right? There was just so many that they were giving their houses to have house churches. They were feeding the poor. They're just doing, again, femininity. There is something to be said about gender roles in a sense that God designed within us. And I think caring, like nurturing caring, is one that God has given women a special abundance of. And again, not that men cannot, but it's just different.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the roles that you see them taking is like actually that nurturing care for those who need it, like those that are the downtrodden, that are the ones that are suffering, the weaker in society, and taking them and lifting them up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as a single woman, you can't say, I'm not married, I can't do that. So it's just...
We did that when we were, not to throw Korea out there again, but we took David under our wing, right, David?
We nurturing you.
Yep. Called you our little brother, and we became...
I suppose you can see
months.
that it was definitely you guys who... I would say if it wasn't for you guys, I'd probably stray a bit from my faith. So the intersection was definitely planned by God.
That's
Still
good.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that leads us into that trustworthiness.
I was just going to mention the Dorcas one, which is interesting because at the end, made her in Acts. And by the time Peter reaches her, actually she had been doing such an amazing service, but had passed away. And God chose to allow Peter to resurrect her through his power because of the amount of help and ministry that she was doing in that church. So this says that, could you imagine, you're such an important part of a church that nope, you're not leaving yet. You're needed still.
He did that with Amber.
Yeah.
Because the whole church was like, no, she can't go yet. Even though they don't know her influence. And her influence is quiet. But somehow, and it's funny because even complete strangers who meet her are captivated by her. Right. And she doesn't say much.
No.
She just smiles.
She's a good girl. So yeah, we can lead into the next,
which is trustworthiness.
Trustworthiness. Yeah.
This is such an important thing because one of the things that breaks down relationships is trust. Once trust is gone, it's hard to get that back in a relationship.
Yeah. And trustworthiness doesn't just mean forever, to having to hold forever until death do us part.
Right.
And we're not going to stray on each other. And
no,
there's way more trustworthiness that has to do with, doesn't have to do with specifically
the marriage,
man or woman even.
Yep. I
But
will never cheat on you. And that's just only such a minute little tiny piece that's in a romantic relationship. So if we put that aside out of a romantic, it doesn't even count.
there's so
So-
much more.
So, like for us, our trustworthiness is in that we both contribute to the house to pay for the mortgage, to pay for the bills. This is, and for the first 6 months, it was like, I hope she does. And I'm sure we were both thinking that of each other because we are having to rely on each other to make this work.
And we're going off of past experiences, going, they seem to be like responsible people. Trustworthiness is, and that's part of it.
I think trustworthiness looks the same, and no matter who it is. If you are a person who is, if I'm confiding into you something that cannot be shared around, whether you're male or female, if you turn around and you go tell somebody else, your trustworthiness slacks.
Mhm.
If I charge you with taking something of value and caring for it to give somewhere else or to bring somewhere else, but you keep it for yourself, whether you're male or female, your trustworthiness is lacking. So,
And there's more than
how
one
you tell
area of like,
truth.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
If you speak the truth and the truth comes in and it's proven true, then your trustworthiness is,
Like I found when being married to my ex, who was not trustworthy, and what he said, it almost like he would tell the truth, but not really. It would always twist,
Yeah.
and then it would become a truth to him. It's weird. Anyway, that's a whole other
he would
conversation.
use enough truth in the lie to make it believable.
But then he himself would actually eventually believe it to be truth. It's kind of narcissistic ability they have. But what I found is that because I was around him saying these things, like I would almost be like excessively truthful in the sense that, like, not that I wasn't being truthful, but I would make sure that every single thing I said, if I generalize something, I'd be like, okay, wait, like I came home around like in the morning. I'm like, wait, it was around 9:30 a.m. Like I have to like specifically, or it might be like 11:30, but I'm like, it was morning. It was morning. It was 11:30, but people might think it was like noon. So if people would possibly think that, or there was possibly any sort of fact that I left out that might come into play later, that I didn't want people to think I was being being not anything but truthful.
Mm-hmm.
And so it almost became excessive to where I was like qualifying everything that didn't need to be qualified.
But it's important, and women more than men can be easily swayed into gossip. And this is where you have to check your own self and ask, is what you're saying truthful? Is it lovely? Is it, but we have a really hard time with that. And I saw that, like my mother, bless her heart, she is not a believer, but she was sharing with me about somebody that she worked with. And just the way she was talking, granted, this woman was narcissistic to the nth degree.
Not her mom.
Not my mom.
Another.
No, the person she worked with. Even to the point where she stole from a friend. Very poor, very bad. But mom was telling me all about it and going on about it. And I get that she just wanted to, just conversation kind of thing. But we do that. We do that. And whether it's somebody we know or
And
not.
sometimes we want to one up.
Yeah.
They're like scandalous truth. So it becomes like I know I had the same thing happen with. And sometimes I have to try to decide whether it's like a storytelling gossip or you're actually just referring to an anecdote. So sometimes when I'm doing that, I'll make sure I'm not saying any names because I'm actually just saying, whoa, when I was on this farm, I had this thing happen. It's not because I want to like gossip about the farmer. It was just an anecdote of something that happened, is an experience in my life that I wanted to talk about.
I probably could have one up mom, but it wasn't my own personal experience. It was just one that I heard of. So I realized right away that it was not something that needed to be shared and was not good for the conversation anyways. So I just let it go. But whether it's somebody we know or not, is that something we should be talking about anyways? Regardless. I mean, it was something that happened many years ago. It was a long time in her past. Don't know if she's ever, I think she's run into her like at Costco and stuff, and geez, I give her the evil eye. And like, oh, wow, you're so cute.
But yeah, like being trustworthy is definitely up there as a personal characteristic you should. And again, Christ was trustworthy. how do we do this? Like it has to be not has to be, but actions and words, but a lot of words, like what you say, you do. That's a big one. If you say something and you don't do it, even if it's like, you should act this way, and then you act the complete opposite, like people don't trust you.
Yeah. And we test our own trustworthiness on our own selves. We lie to ourselves. We're our worst liars. We will say things to ourselves. Today, I'm going to do this. And we don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day we say, today, I'm going to.
Definitely going to 100% not eat McDonald's. And that's what happened half an hour later.
There is a meme that says, darn it, I didn't go to the gym again today. That's like the third day in 7 years.
Yeah, it's like a
300. So apparently you've been saying it for 7 years that I was going to go to the gym today and you still haven't gone. You might want to stop lying to yourself that you're actually going to go. Yeah.
What do you think about this topic, trustworthiness, David?
Yeah, I'm listening. I'm trying to really, I guess more. I was more interested.
But some of this can even, I know we're going to.
It can, yeah, a lot of this can be applied to the opposite end of this conversation too. But at the same time, I don't want to, because you guys you're gonna bombard me with questions next week.
We're going to be going.
We're also. I guess how would this look like within the church community? Yes, that was my next thought. Was how would trustworthiness within church communities look like? With I guess.
Definitely the gossip thing, because that can be rampant in the church as much as it can be anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so basically, how you converse with people will see how you, because that's the other thing. If you talk about somebody behind their back, to say I was saying something to you, then you're going to assume, probably rightly, that I'm going to talk about you behind your back.
Yeah.
So there's not it's a very simple, logical conclusion to come to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also,
I don't think I can trust you with my secrets because you just told me that person's secret and they just told you that.
Yeah. And the thing is too, if you're living a lie and living sin, and I don't mean like we all sin every day, there's times we sin, but I'm talking about like that like purposeful, continuous sin of whatever it is, then you're not living you're not, like we talked about, we just talked about this before the podcast, how you're a reflection of Christ. So if your reflection to people is you say one thing on Sunday and you do another thing on Monday, then that reflection of Christ will be distorted because they're not going to see a trustworthiness in your actions. Your actions and your deeds are two different things.
Yep.
Your words are two different things.
It even goes, people out on the street. Satan knows the Bible very well.
Yes.
People out on the street surprisingly know a lot more about the Bible than we think. And one of their biggest ones is to judge not.
Yeah.
When we as Christians, we go out and we start slamming our blackboards against their heads,
there's a whole other.
We're trying to make them live a way that they are not called to live.
Yeah.
But that's another actions and words. They don't trust us. So if we want to present ourselves as trustworthy to the world, we need to change how we treat them as well.
Yeah. And remember, this is all based off of Proverbs 31 of developing what a woman or a woman who fears the Lord is like. The woman who fears the Lord is what it's actually called in this version that I have on my phone. The ESV is what it, and just that, she's specifically a wife in here, but that she didn't just start all of this the moment she became a wife. Like this would have been her character before leading up to it.
Yeah.
So like even when it comes to her work ethic, like perceives that her so it's just like she considers the fields and buys it. With the fruit of her hand, she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with the strength that makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the distaff and her hands to hold the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. So she's a busy lady. And again, this doesn't start the day that she said, I do. This is something she would have developed early in life. So and again, I know that there's the idea of functioning with a little too much work in my life, which is exhausting, but it doesn't mean, I don't think it means exhausting yourself to the point of working so much that you never take time off or you have downtime or anything.
Yeah.
But it's what is she filling her day with?
Yep. As a mother, and after what I've gone through in the last few weeks with my daughter, and still am to this day because of the lack of support between the care home, between Marlena and the care home and myself. The two of us we're having to deal with this every day. Sleep 36 hours, no sleep, 24 hours, no sleep. We end up having to do what we need to do because Amber needs us and we can't slack off. And that is the perception that can't do it all the time. What they say here, she gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. Like, she's still dark out and she's up, but she does, and she works all day long and doesn't, you can't sustain that. Trust me, I've tried.
But by
bang.
what is she filling her day up with? And for me, I'm in the same position with my work. We're short staffed, so we're working like 10, or like tomorrow will be 10 days straight. And it's just because it's needed.
It's needed.
But at the same time, like when I go down to one job in January, like I'll have technically more time, but what am I going to fill that time with?
Right.
So I need to be careful that what I'm filling that time with is worthwhile.
Right.
Again, there's nothing wrong with having some downtime, playing some video games or whatever. But if you start
doing that,
if that's what you're filling your time with, if you're getting up before it's light and going to bed after it's dark because you're playing video games, for me, that would be something I'd be tempted to do. I try not to.
Don't do it.
One reason I choose not to play multiplayer games, so I can just turn it off. If I can't get at it for a few days, that's fine. A week, it's okay. A month even, that's what happens. But for me, I've had to create those kind of rules to myself of not playing massive multiplayer online because I know I will get caught up in it and I don't want to. So those are the things, like as a woman, regardless of marital status, but more importantly, when you're single and you theoretically have more time, because especially if you're a young person, like you aren't dating or whatever, and you're not in a full-time job yet, you have more time. So what are you filling that time with? What kind of work ethic are you developing in your life? And that's why I'm saying God's calling us to something in our singleness. It's not just, oh, look at all the extra time I have. I don't have to spend with the family or my husband or my kids or whatever. It's actually, what are you filling that time with? And how are you using it for your faith and for what God's calling you to do? So that's for me. And again, there's the stereotype of the women watching the soap operas.
Yes.
And yeah, that may be there's a certain point of some stereotypes are based on a cruel truth. But the thing is, it's not the soap operas. It's that idleness, essentially. What are you filling it in with stuff that really doesn't matter? Again, small amounts of some of these things are not bad.
Do they still have those soap operas?
Oh yeah, I think there's 4 of them still on.
Wow.
Because last one was that.
I remember when I was in high school and there was always 2 or whatever that you would watch. And I remember getting quite caught up in one of them, and it's Days of Our Lives. And I remember thinking after a while, I was just like, why am I watching this? It's the same story played on in different ways over and over again ad nauseum.
Yeah.
And I quit.
That's like theoretically the same thing you could say about Hallmark movies. As much as they're cute, as we like to say they're cute or whatever, I can't even anymore. I'm sorry, Hallmark, but like 132 Hallmark movies that are pretty much the same thing, I'm done.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Small town girl breaks up with evil boyfriend or whatever, goes back home to where she grew up and meets Mr. Perfect,
Who was her best friend growing up.
Yeah.
And everything's good for Christmas. Wow. Yes.
Hallelujah. Praise the Lord.
Again, things nowadays make things even easier to get sucked into this stuff because of like on demand.
Yes.
And streaming and all this type of stuff makes it so much easier.
Eventually there's going to get to a point where there will be a Hallmark movie for every single day of the year.
Yeah, we're just going to count down to Christmas.
Yeah.
There'll be 365, and there'll be people that do it. And I'll just be like,
I know a few who will.
And there won't be repeated. No, it'll be a new one.
No, but they'll all be the same story. Yeah. There was an author I was reading and she'd had this, and I'd read it going, oh yeah, I picked up.
I think I did that too.
Didn't I just read this?
I did that with one too, and I'm going, there's like the same thing. It's like a mystery, but it's like a romantic kind of weird mystery. But it would be like, always be like some sort of disabled person in there. And the same thing would happen with that same person. They'd have the same storyline. And eventually I'd be like, It's reading the same story over and over again.
Yep. Tired. Done.
Wait a few months.
Yep.
So let's move on to generosity and compassion. The woman in Proverbs 31 is known for helping the poor and just making sure she says, let's do her. Let me find it. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. And it's just how many times we there's the obvious ways you'll work at a homeless shelter or soup kitchen or something like that. But actually, when you actually look at it, yes, those are definitely 100% good things to go to if that's where you feel you're calling.
Uh-huh.
But I think too, it's also not just helping the poor and the needy in like monetarily poor and needy, but there's those who are that society, like they're left out and they need people's help. And it may not just necessarily be those who are financially poor or on some sort of drugs or something, which definitely need help. And there's people who are called into that side of things. But there can be those who are like need help in other ways, like mental health, or maybe people who are left and they're just ostracized by society.
There are so many different societies out there, different ministries out there that you can try and check out if you're interested in seeing how you can help those who are, or there's M2W, which is man to man, woman to woman, and they are a prison ministry. So you don't get girls going to guys' prison, you don't get guys going. So you're specifically, and you go in, the last time I did it, we went in groups. And it was like when I went with the girls, we went to Colony Farm, which is for those who are mentally unstable. They had also criminal and the criminal element that went with it. But my friend Judy, who did beadwork, and she did a lot of native beadwork. Her husband is Métis. So she taught them how to make jewelry and do other kind of projects doing beadwork. So there's that. There are homeless shelters. Our church has one over the winter, the extreme weather shelter.
Yeah.
They need
There's
them.
like so many ways you can help though. Yes, you can give financially, which people are called to do.
Yes.
You can give time. You can give skills.
Yes.
You can give of product like food or other things that your company or you can create.
Yeah.
There's so many ways. Like when people go and they think about you, are they thinking that you're generous? And that doesn't just mean like they see you give to the offering plate every week or whatever. It's just you're generous with your attention.
Yeah.
And you're like, because you like when you care about something, you're going to spend time with it.
Yeah.
And if you're just like at a soup kitchen helping, but you're like blah, 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 like you're not actually there. You're just doing it because you think you need to be doing it. Like you can actually be into the moment and actually seeing the people. And then, so when people think about you, or when you think of people, the odd time that people do think about you, if you said your name and the word generous nearby, what would if they said both of those words in a sentence, what would that look like?
You're bringing to mind something that happened last summer, something like that, because we have the extreme weather shelter and we have this lady, Jenny, who is like I think she's stepping down. I think that was her retirement speech or something like that. I can't remember. Anyways, she broke down in tears when she talked about the people that come to the extreme weather shelter and the relationships that she had built with them. She loved them so much that when she talked about them, she cried. This is the kind of heart you need to have if you're going to go out and serve in the community and to help, regardless of which area you want with. Maybe you want to go visit the elderly people because there's nobody to visit them.
I remember we were talking about this woman in Proverbs 31.
Yes.
She did not just start all this stuff at the day she became a wife. This is something that would have been a part of her character. So she would have been most likely known about for these things before, which is one reason that this man may have chosen her to be a wife, because she has shown all these things as a single person.
Right.
And again, we're not doing this to find a marriage partner. May result in finding a marriage partner because they see a person, woman of good character. Like, why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
But it's not the purpose.
No.
The purpose is not that.
Your purpose is, and this is one of my heart cries, is that when I come to the end of my life and I stand before God at the end of all things, and he says to me, well done, good and faithful servant. And that breaks my heart, because that is what I want to be. I want to have him say that to me.
They had a character say that to Mr. Whitaker, like a character who's
Did
supposed to be an
they?
angel, say it to Mr. Whitaker on Adventures in Odyssey, and I cry every time.
I cry every time.
Because I know he's a fictional character, but if a person of that character deserves to hear that.
Yep. And I want to be that kind of character, and not because I'm doing it for any accolades. I don't care if people see my good deeds or not, because that's neither here nor there. It's God's heart.
And you're not doing it for God to see your deeds in a sense of, look what I can do.
No,
It's actually
Pride.
an outflow of God from you to the other people.
Yes.
So you're flowing out. You're not like trying to gather in.
Exactly. I want to give so much of myself, and I see that how I do with Amber. And even when I'm exhausted and I feel like I've got nothing left to give, I find something somewhere. So I says, she needs me more, and I will rest later.
Did you have a comment, David?
Yeah, so you guys emphasized a lot around the character of a person when it comes to all this information, or when it comes to being generous and compassionate. But I feel like the character is half of it, because, for example, when Monique or you or people have children, character is a part of it, but there needs to be a way for the parent, or for people who are taking responsibility for young children, to be able to cultivate the compassion and generosity that we wish to see. What would that look like? How would you go about cultivating young women, or young children? How would you go about cultivating that with
character.
using the life of Jesus?
That's actually a really good question. And this is where we would charge the older women
To teaching the younger ones.
to teach the younger ones.
Which is what it says in scripture. And I think too, number one will be your actions.
Yes.
Your actions will always be what people are watching, even kids and young people especially.
Yeah.
They see everything. But yeah, that's a passive thing. But like to actively cultivate presenting opportunities. That's why I think sometimes we don't just leave young people's or youth groups to figure out their own events or things they're going to do. Like they might have some input, but usually there's leadership that guides it.
Yeah.
So there'll be times when they bring a youth group to a soup kitchen, or they'll bring a youth group to something where they can they help paint a barn, or
mission trips,
something
like
like mission trips down to. So it actually, being a leader and you're called to do, encouraging those who are going. Encouragement is a big one. Yeah, it just depends on how the opportunity comes up. Within the church, I think, is definitely providing the opportunities and giving an example.
Mm-hmm.
And then, your teaching of Christ, his entire sacrifice was generosity and compassion. But just like how he dealt with the women around him or the children that were around him.
Yep.
Like it was always with gentleness, compassion.
And we who are older, who have been around who have gone through these things, who have gone through these groups, maybe you're married and you're a widow, or maybe you're a married woman who is unable to have children, or you're just an older. You don't have to be even that old, even 30s, whatever. But there was one time when I was asked to be a camp counselor for a group of kids. They had nobody. I was 8. They were 15. I wasn't that much older, but but you will be surprised at the age difference between a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old is quite large. And there was one night when we all had a cabin with a little potbelly stove in the middle. And in the middle of the night, a thunderstorm rolled in, and we were in a valley. Oh my word. That thunderstorm was so loud. It sounded like it was hitting the ground, and the girls were screaming and hanging on to each other. And I'm not afraid of lightning. So I got up, I put a fire in the potbelly stove, I got some water, and I made everybody a cup of hot chocolate. Those girls loved me to pieces, and I showed them through calm and compassionate caring that we were okay. And I gave them that sense of feeling safe. I was 18. You don't have to be very old to be able to be an influence on a younger generation.
Everybody wants to be an influencer, yet we are all influencers.
We all are. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Those around us or those younger than us always, like we have that with the young ladies who do this leadership at Taekwondo.
Yep.
So what you do is you present the qualities of the person that you want to be, and then you also have conversations if they have questions. And then, because there's always, again, depends on the situation and the relationship you have with them. If they're not your child or in your faith, then you only have so much that you can say that you feel comfortable with.
Yep.
Yeah, if they're not of age.
Yeah.
And
you don't have to be and it doesn't have to be a huge thing.
No.
Everybody thinks I don't do really huge. I can't do big. I didn't do a great big thing. I surprised myself that I knew how to build a fire at 18.
Yeah, it's just a lot of times you're just put in a position and you just, well, I guess I'm doing it. And then you just don't realize you.
And that's pretty much what it was.
So that goes on to the next one, preparedness.
Thank you for joining us on this enriching journey through the many facets of femininity. As we've explored today, the strength and essence of a woman isn't confined to societal norms or marital status. It's our hope that you're inspired to recognize, celebrate, and cultivate these virtues, not just in yourselves, but in the women around you. Let's create a world where women are celebrated for their depth, wisdom, and character. Until next time, keep the conversation going and remember to live your single life to its fullest.